All right, well, we're here for episode 3, Uncommon Discipleship Podcast. I'm John Ware, a.k.a. the Southern Pastor. This is Pastor Ed, a.k.a. the Godfather. And we started a conversation last week about why discipleship is so hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like why following Jesus is so hard. That's the whole point of this podcast, is we want to help people follow Jesus better, follow Jesus more effectively in this culture, which is kind of what we started to talk about last week, this culture. But wanted to speak a little bit more to that, especially living in the United States. So let's talk a little bit today about America, living in the United States. Great blessing, great challenges, right? It's kind of what we encounter in the United States. And I just think it's important that anybody that tries to follow Jesus in any culture, part of following Jesus is becoming aware and self-aware of the culture you're trying to follow Jesus in.
Yeah.
Because that will significantly hinder or it can be a great asset as well, right? But just being aware and alert of the culture you're in, the country you're following Jesus in, I just think is so vital. And, you know, one of the things that John Mark Comer put in his book, Practicing the Way, is he said that in America, we're being trained and formed for things to be easy, fast, and controllable, right? And just think, this is what we love, right? Basically, many things, we don't have to go out and milk cows, right? We could go to Chipotle and burrito, white rice, pinto beans. I'm just giving you my order. Steak, double steak, queso, lettuce, sour cream, and then we walk out of there.
The guac, can't forget the guac.
Yeah, I don't do guac on the burrito,
okay.
but
okay.
Do you even eat there? Is that real Hispanic food?
No, I don't eat it. I don't.
You eat the real thing at home, right? You get the rice and beans at the house, but like that's easy, right? And then he says fast. We get Chipotle fast. We walk most of the time, but you walk in there, you go, you're going through, you get a big fat burrito fast, and then controllable. I want this. I want that. I want this, right? So that is kind of what consumerism and a free market has kind of become, is that fast, easy, and controllable. So that's what we're being baked in, okay?
Wow.
When John Mark Comer says here that I think is true, following Jesus is hard, slow, and there's so much about being spiritually formed and being discipled we don't control.
Yeah.
So can you just feel that, like why it's so hard and difficult? Because the United States, the American way, which has so many benefits, but it's a pressure cooker, it's a crock pot that is boiling us and shaping us to be a certain way. And do you feel that, Ed? I
feel it a lot. There's
the pressure.
It's a great tension. And just you mentioning those 3 things, immediately I thought of, how the Christian life is the opposite. And I read once, I can't remember where I read it, but it says that comfort and good times produce weak men. And I think it has a lot to do with that. I think that, and I'm not just talking about men here.
But I think it's a good.
Yeah.
I think it's a good example.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, men, we as men have to lead. But
even men's testosterone levels,
it's decreased when you're comfortable.
Well, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Is like even the male hormone testosterone, they say, only grows when there's struggle.
Yeah.
Right? It only grows when there's struggle.
Yeah.
And in our culture, we are eliminating, especially for men, every struggle men would have.
Yeah.
So you need food. You ain't going out and killing it. You ain't.
No.
At least me. I'm a city boy. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to be out shooting guns, carving the meal.
Yeah.
Or, if you want a woman, you can get on Tinder and do a one night thing. You wouldn't even got to fight other men for it, right? You just swipe, right? You know what I'm saying? So it's like the lack of struggle, even for men, is like our testosterone levels and everything is just going way down.
Yeah, and I think it has translated into church as well. How I do believe that once you accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, you are saved. And we're covered by grace and His mercy, and His grace is new every morning. But I also believe that we have kind of laid back and not really tried to kill the flesh or fight against our comfort, fight against, our preferences of how we want things, of how we like things. And it's something that we can understand and empathize with, because that's how we're being shaped. We're being shaped where you order things specifically to what your needs or what your wants are, your preferences are. Yeah. So even growing up that way, I look at my kids and I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, am I really discipling my kids the best way I can? Talking about filtering with the word and with Christ and what the gospel really is. And I realized, I'm like, man, I'm actually pushing my kids into initiating them into this culture and the system slowly, even without knowing. Mm-hmm. I always tell my wife, don't even ask them what they want for food. I'm like, don't even ask them.
Constant tension in my house. Constant tension, because I'm like, the more options you give them, the more they think they're in control. But you want to give them options because you have, but it's like, it's a tension. And I just think probably doing what you're doing is explaining to them.
Yeah.
And being like, because I feel like my kids, I've trained my kids to know when they with me, you get what you get, baby. And you don't throw a fit. When they're with my wife, she go, do you want this hot or cold? Do you know how much do you want? Do you want cheese in this? Do you want this and that thing? Y'all got me. I'm like, y'all got brains. Y'all have got hands. Y'all have bodies. Y'all can think. Y'all can open a fridge. Y'all can get stuff out. It's gonna be a lot messier when they do it.
Yeah.
But I create the environment and the atmosphere, and you and then you can eat if you want.
Yeah.
Not saying that's right, wrong, indifferent, but I'm just saying that's how probably what guys
I think
bring.
we need that balance. We always need that balance. I mean, Jamil woke up last night. Now, Jamil's my son. He's 5. He woke up last night like around 1:00 in the morning. Mommy, and I get up. He sees me walk in the room and he's like, I want mommy, because he knows. He knows, So I'm like, what do you want? And he's like, I want water with ice. And I'm like, with ice? I'm like, you can get up and get your own water.
Come on.
But I went and got him the water. Okay. I didn't put no ice on it. I didn't put no ice on it, though.
You wanted him just to make sure. Yeah.
I'm like, no.
I'm gonna get you that, but you don't expect.
Don't expect, all your wants to be met, And I think the same thing has been translated into churches and into the church culture. How there's a lot of pastors, a lot of churches out there, and I like I said, I understand, I empathize, because we have been shaped and formed, and we have kind of conformed, which Romans 12:2 says, "Do not conform to the things of this world," And I feel like we have done that. How we kind of think about, how can we have this? How can we have that? So that people can feel comfortable. And all those things are good. Yeah. I'm not saying they're bad. Okay?
It's hard to be comfortable, like relevant or comfortable, because Paul said, I became all things to all people so that by some possible means I might save some.
Yeah.
So he had this idea of, how can I reach? How can I be heard? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, what's that line look like of wanting to be heard and wanting to be relevant, but then at the same time not compromising what the message is and playing to people's preferences and things like that.
I think one of the things I love about Christ was that he did that in a just a beautiful way, where he could kind of meet people where they were.
Yes.
He would kind of meet their needs, their initial needs, because at the end of the day, if you're uncomfortable, you might not hear a word of what I'm saying. If you're hungry, I mean, you might not even want to hear what I have to say. I'm hungry, man. Feed me, And I think that Jesus met people, and he initially, most of them, he healed them. He brought food to them, But then after all that, he hit them with the truth.
Yeah. Facts.
We were talking about that before we were on air.
Yeah.
How you said that a good leader, what was it again?
I said a good leader lets people down at a rate they can withstand.
I mean, that's powerful.
Just because in leadership, you feel like you're always disappointing somebody. You're always disappointing a certain portion of people, because you have to make decisions as a decision maker, but you always realize your decisions will positively affect some and negatively affect others.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think that that's why relationships are so important, because when people are close to you, even when you let them down, even when you're what the expectation is, you don't meet their expectation, or, you don't cater to what their wants and it's like
But they trust your heart.
they trust your heart
Yeah.
and they know that your intentions are good, and not only intentions, that you actually want to challenge them into growing.
And that will mean putting them in a place of discomfort. I driving over here, I was listening to somebody, and he was saying, Jesus was a broad door, but a narrow path. So you're talking about balance, right? Like Jesus said, whoever would be my disciple, if anyone would come and follow me, right? There was that anyone, right?
Yeah.
Like broad door, but he didn't mince words over what the path looked like. He said, narrow is the road that leads to life, and few find it, right? It's kind of that balance you're talking about. He's a broad door. If anyone would come. But then he said, just let you know, that door is wide, but that path is narrow that leads to life. And I think what we try to do in the United States is we try to broaden that path. we try to have a broad door and a broad path, right? And I think what we do is then we can water it down, right? I was telling you before that like John Tyson had this statement of like Paul knew before he was going to try to make Romans or try to convert Romans into being Christians, he had to understand how Rome, the country of Rome, made Romans.
Yeah.
Like before you're going to convert, like before we try to say, how are we going to think like Christ? We have to say, how have we been trained to think like Americans? Right? And I think Paul felt this struggle, right? In the church in Galatia, one of the things he said to them was, who has bewitched you that you have been taken captive by this legalism of thinking you need to be circumcised, you need to follow these rules of Moses, and then you add Jesus and legalism, and that actually equals. But that was very cultural at the time, right?
Yeah.
So he was fighting like a cultural way of doing things, of helping people to follow Jesus in that cultural way. And I even love his sarcasm. He's like, hey, if you think circumcision makes you more spiritual, let's go ahead and chop the whole kit and caboodle off. If that makes you spiritual, go ahead and do that, right? But even then, they were like, he was trying to deconstruct the culture that they were in to help them know how to follow Jesus. And I just think it's so important for us to be aware of the crock pot that we have been baked in the United States.
Yeah.
How do you think that applies to the Hispanic culture, right? Because you came over here when, or would you come over to the United States?
See, I went to Dominican Republic when I was 2.
Okay.
And I was back and forth, but I lived in DR, a good Dominican Republic. I lived there for a pretty long time. I came back for junior and senior year.
Okay.
Here, so
So you've got a kind of unique. You've been kind of in two different.
Yeah. So I've seen both things. And it's just crazy how culture plays a part in even the way you need to approach someone. In the Hispanic culture, I feel like you have to be very direct and bold.
Okay.
And here in the American culture, I think we have to think more of kind of the way we present things to people. Yeah, feelings, all that stuff.
Perception.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things.
Yeah. But in places like Dominican Republic, and I've been to Puerto Rico as well, Panama. You have to be direct with people.
Can't sugarcoat.
No, you can't sugarcoat it.
Black and white.
Black and white.
No gray.
Yep. I don't know if I should even talk about this. But it's like,
we can edit it out.
Yeah. So, for example, like, you have people in the Hispanic culture that go to church. Boyfriend and girlfriends can't live together and go to church. It's like, no, if you're going to follow Christ, this needs to end right here and now type of thing, And it's like, but I get, where other people might be.
That's a very
journey.
Cultural,
yeah, it's
that. We don't say that is just cultural. That's cultural. There's a cultural way of doing things in the. We're not saying that either of them are biblical, but especially when we're talking about you're saying your culture.
Yeah, and
the
our
culture way in the United States is normally you cohabitate before you get married to try it out to see if you're which we'll have a whole episode.
we'll
on
have
that
another episode on that
at
one
some point. But yeah,
I made that as an example because they are like super direct. I mean, you walk into a church and they see you holding hands and you guys are adults and they're like, "Are you guys married?"
Wow.
Like immediately. And if you're not, they'll like,
What are you doing?
are you guys like
engaged.
engaged? And if not, but that's the other thing, right? It have led people to get married, without being prepared or without even like considering other things about their significant others because they were rushed into it because of the culture. So, I just see this.
And then you have the American culture, which is like, you can be living together, engaged for 8 years. And and no one, and even churches like, oh, whatever, you're good, ain't no big deal. And yeah, so you can see both negative sides of the cultural way of doing things instead of like, okay, what is, but yeah. So, but I mean, and I just think noticing the influence of that and how, even in the United States, and like, this is the way you're being taught to think about dating. This is the way you're being taught to think about like relationships, is that you try them on, you see if it's going to work. And so you don't think in terms of covenant, you think in terms of contract, you think in terms of, is this good for me? Is this, you know what I'm saying? Whereas that kind of cultural mindset is like,
it's about commitment.
It's about commitment, but it can be blind commitment to where you don't do due diligence.
Exactly.
And when I say due diligence, it's like you take time to see how this person handles things, right? You take time to like, how does this person handle stress? How does this person handle whatever? And so it is I want to make sure we're a good match, right? But when I'm ready, when the time of commitment's ready, it's like, so there's challenges on both ends.
Yeah, I just feel like, when it comes to, that's why culture is so important. Understanding, like Paul said, understanding the culture, understanding how people are shaped and formed, what are the preferences, or, that's going to help us even approach the subject of presenting Christ to them, But it's just interesting that we were talking about how here in the United States it's about the pursuit of happiness.
Right. And now really that's in the vision statement. That is in the vision statement of the country, right? Is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So that is the overarching vision of our nation at the end of the day, which has trickled down into everything. Are we happy? Does it make me happy? Right. And and I mean, that's, so you have like happiness, and then you have Jesus. I don't think Jesus, not that Jesus don't want you happy, but I think as a Christian, like our greatest joy is his joy, is when he's happy, and his happiness becomes our happiness, and our happiness becomes his happiness. And but we've got that cultural pressure of, are you happy? Are you being fulfilled? Are you having your needs met? And it can be a real battle, man. It is.
And I think the biggest challenge is, and I told you before, I compare this with like food,
Right.
And it's like, if you give a baby, the fruit stuff first, they're not going to want to eat the vegetable stuff afterwards.
You give them Cinnabons or something.
That's why it's always recommended to give them the actual vegetable stuff first, because once you taste, we're in this culture that dopamine hits are hitting us so many times a day through scrolling, through instant gratification, through all this other stuff. And there's a continuous pursuit of what makes me feel good and happy.
And you have people that you don't even know in Silicon Valley and around the United States that are literally curating what makes you happy, because they've done human studies, human psychology, and you are literally, in many ways, we are in some ways being controlled. Our brains are being manipulated.
There's a lot behind that. But it's like when you bring that into the church and within our culture, and we have all these things to consider, of course we're going to struggle. Of course it's going to be hard for us. I mean, if you're accustomed to eating certain amount of food, and that food is doing harm to your body, high cholesterol, diabetes, whatever the case may be, because of the diet that you've been brought up on eating. When you see the doctor and the doctor tells you, hey, you need to eat this, and that, I mean, your taste buds are not even accustomed to it. So even though it's going to be good for you, even though it might even restore some of the health issues that you have, you're going to struggle, even when it means life and death.
Come on.
Because at the end of the day, most of the time we are addicted to this instant gratification, to feeling happy, to feeling good, and we struggle with long-term gratification. We struggle with knowing that our reward, yes, we might see certain good things here on earth. And there's so many things that we can enjoy. Love, family. I mean, there's so many things that we can enjoy.
That God created.
Community, things that God created. But at the end of the day, our real reward won't be even here. And the biggest reward that we can have here is to actually get to know God and walk with Him.
And become like Him.
But the culture wants you to become more like yourself.
Come on.
Because that's what's going to make you happy. Ignoring everything else. Ignoring that is killing you. Ignoring that you are even not even connecting even with people or investing in the people. It's just totally selfish.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
well, I mean, that's one of the things that Paul told Timothy. He said, in the last days, people will be lovers
of themselves.
And selfie, iPhone, I you know what I'm saying? Like everything's you, and
words are powerful. People,
I know. And I saw this one guy, look on the back of your phone. There's what's on the back of it? An apple that's got a bite out of it. He was like, that Genesis 3 played itself out. I'm like, Lord Jesus. There might be some truth in that. No, but I mean, but that's Paul. He said, hey, people are going to be lovers of themselves. And then even so, what we were studying yesterday, 2 Timothy 4, when it said that, people won't put up with sound doctrine.
Yeah.
They will find teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. Right. And, I just think that we, like in the United States, right, like we have to understand that there are voices we want to hear, that we want to hear, because it affirms the stuff we want to be true. And you don't have to look very far.
There's
in our culture.
Buffet.
It's a buffet. You don't have to look very far to find someone that will affirm what you want. And I think that's why it's so, it's vital for us to understand the voices we want to hear and the voices we need to hear.
Yeah.
Because there's a distinct difference. There is truth that we need to hear, that we will purposely block out if our goal is personal happiness and it's not following Jesus. And so, this is such a nuanced conversation, but I think we've done a pretty good job of, like, hopefully what we're doing is making you aware, right? I just feel like some people aren't even aware of the crock pot they're in the United States. And, in order for something to change, it's important that what is unconscious becomes conscious. Like you can't even realize, you can't even realize something is influencing you unless you become aware of it, right?
Yeah.
And so, in the United States, right, easy, fast, controllable. The way Jesus normally works, the way His Holy Spirit works, it's going to be a lifelong thing. It's going to be hard. It's going to be slow, and you're not in control. So I think in closing out this conversation, is are we willing to submit to the long work of God, the long, slow, arduous, of what Eugene Peterson called long obedience in the same direction, right? Is that what or are we going to just want to give into like I just think it's going to be our life, man.
Yeah.
This is what we're called to follow him. It's not going to be a short process. It's going to be a long journey. But deconstructing the culture we're living in, the United States we're living in, and its culture and its ways of shaping and forming us is so vital as we try to follow Jesus. Any final words you want to bring?
Yeah, I mean, what comes to mind is when we are being shaped and formed by a culture and we are not aware, Jesus himself could be presented to us. I mean, Jesus could just come down again and we won't recognize him. Because our filter is not his word. We're filtering things through society, through the culture, through the way we've been shaped and formed. And I just, encourage everybody to just be aware, to just be aware so that we can actually recognize sound doctrine. We can actually recognize Christ.
Because, dude, like even you saying that, I'm so much more convinced if Jesus came back to the United States or he came to the United States, he'd be crucified by us. Because let's just call it as it is. Republicans would want him. Sorry, I don't know if I should say this, but some Republicans would want him to save the United States.
Yeah,
political ruler. Let's get back to our conservative roots and this, that, and the other thing. And Democrats would be like, why aren't you more affirming? Why aren't you more loving? Why aren't you more accepting? I thought you were all about love. And you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Everyone would try to pull Jesus to their side instead of saying, do I need to detox from how I've wanted Jesus to be and actually hear him and understand him and learn him for who he is, not who I want him to be. All right. It's episode 3 done.
Yep.
We'll be back. Episode 4. Thanks for joining in. We love y'all.